Welcome everyone to the Intelligent Miner podcast. I'm your host, Carly Leonida, and it's a great pleasure today to welcome my guest, who is Rob Tyson. Now, you guys will probably know Rob as the host of the Dig Deep podcast, but what you might not know is that when he's not podcasting, Rob is an expert executive search consultant. He's been doing this for over 20 years. He's the director of Mining International, which provides leadership search services to the global mining industry. And Rob and I have been having a long-running conversation via email and at various industry events this year about the talent situation in the mining sector. There's obviously a lot of talk at the moment in industry circles around recruitment and retention, the fact that it's hard to find people, it's hard to keep good people as well. And we decided that it was time to turn this into something that people could listen to with practical insights that they could take back to their own companies and apply. So welcome to the podcast, Rob. How does it feel to be in the hot seat for a change?
Yeah, I suppose it is different. I've done one other podcast before, but obviously I'm the host normally. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'll be fine.
You're in good hands. This is not my first rodeo. Brilliant. So do you want to start by telling us a little bit about Mining International and what you do and where you play?
Yeah, certainly. So I've been in recruitment for over 25 years now. Of that, probably 15 years in the mining industry. I started my career when I lived in Australia for 10 years, and I worked for a company, one of the big recruitment companies, Randstad, and they asked the office who wanted to start a division in the mining industry. So they wanted to open up a mining office in Queensland. So I put my hand up and worked for them. So I was in Queensland for 5 years, and then moved back to the UK because I had three young children. And then when I moved back to the UK, loved the industry, wanted to continue recruiting in mining, and started Mining International by myself. And yeah, as you mentioned in the introduction, we're a specialist search recruitment consultancy focusing solely on the mining and resources sector. We work with mining operators, companies, consultancies, contractors, mining funds, family offices across the globe. And we obviously help them source and secure the best talent available. And I suppose companies would use us because they want to, we actually try and find the candidates that the companies can't find. So we've got a particular system that we use, an in-depth methodology that we use to find the best talent available in the marketplace at that particular time. Our company has some values: integrity, excellence, service, and results. And that's what we try and pride ourselves on. And yeah, so we've been running now since I moved back 2014. So that's 11 years now, and we cover the globe. And I'm actually looking to open up which I haven't really mentioned too much, but I'm looking to open up a entity or office in Australia, because I eventually do want to live back out there. And I'm looking to open up an entity later this year. So just expand our footprint.
Very good. Okay. And so from your perspective, what is the recruitment situation like in the mining industry at the moment? It feels like leadership in particular is an area where competition is really fierce at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose if you look, and I suppose you can compare this to most industries. If you look at the demographics of the workforce, there is a lot of older people in every industry, or most industries. And if you look at the mining industry, there is, and if you're looking at leadership, there is a top-heavy number of executives, senior leaders within the mining companies. So that there is obviously competition at that level. And I suppose with commodity prices staying where they are at the moment, obviously there's a few runaways, gold at the moment. There's going to be, I suppose, with more hopefully more money coming into the industry, where projects need developing, expansion. I do think you'll see more and more job vacancies come about over the years. But yeah, it is a little bit, it is difficult out there at the moment, as we were just speaking off air, especially with the tariff situation that's just come in. I think companies are hesitant in terms of what they're looking to what they're looking at the outlook of what they want to is their strategic plans still in play with these tariffs, or do they have to re-divert, look at their plans? So I think there's hesitation in the marketplace at the moment.
I don't think this is just a problem in recruitment at the moment. It seems like everyone's talking about what could happen in tariffs and yeah, like you say, putting strategic plans on hold until things pan out a little bit, but we shall see.
Yeah.
So is the talent crisis as bad as everyone says it is? I've heard a lot of people say we don't have a talent crisis, we have a selectivity crisis. Is that true?
Um, well, I suppose, and again, I've been pretty vocal on LinkedIn around this. I think there is in certain areas, and I suppose certain jurisdictions as well. And I don't think necessarily it's evident and obvious to all. However, I think over time it will become more evident, especially when more, as I mentioned, more money comes into the industry, projects kick off, and expansion plans for operations can come and play where they need more people. So there's obviously certain disciplines where I think there is skill shortages, and I suppose, examples of that are when we have taken mandates on. We can look at, because we spend so much time mapping the market, we can see certain roles where there's less people available, or less people with the right skills and experience that we're looking to approach than other roles. So if you look at, I suppose, mine engineering, resource geology, mineral processing, I suppose ESG type related roles, and also I suppose trades as well. Again, we don't work in trades, but when I speak to various people, every industry is competing for certain trades. So I would say there is skill shortages in some of those disciplines. However, I think depending on the region, some people may argue. If you look at the Western world, I think, yeah, there is skill shortages in some of those disciplines I mentioned. However, if you look at some developing countries, if you look at Africa, if you look at Asia, there is probably not necessarily an abundance, but there is far more of those kinds of people, mine engineers, mineral processing professionals in those particular countries or particular continents. So maybe, and that's where some people have challenged me to say that there isn't necessarily skill shortages in those particular regions. So yeah, again, I suppose it depends what region you're considering. But in the Western world, I'd say, yeah, there is skill shortages, and it's probably only gonna get worse before it gets better. And as I mentioned, a lot of people, because there's a lot of older workforce, a lot of them over maybe, I don't know, next 10 to 15 years will be leaving the industry. And there isn't enough people coming through the system, i.e. studying for these particular disciplines, engineering, mineral processing, obviously certain types of geology. They're not there. There's a lack of interest in studying those qualifications, which will, and this has not just happened recently, it has been ongoing, well, as long as the time that I've been in the industry, because I remember when I was working in Queensland, they were actually few of the senior executives that I met back then, they did say that there is a skill shortage, and that was back in early 2000s. So the problem hasn't gone away, and it's probably got a little bit worse.
Yeah, I can believe that. I mean, I graduated 2002, 2003, and there was maybe 15 people on my course who took geology. So Yeah, I can imagine that's probably getting those numbers are getting smaller, shall we say.
Certainly are.
So, I mean, given this problem, would you say that companies are getting more strategic about recruitment and, where they look for people and which skill sets, people with transferable skill sets from other industries, are they starting to think outside the box a bit?
Yeah, definitely. I think I suppose more companies are realizing that obviously traditional pipelines of talent aren't enough. And I suppose we're seeing many mining companies look at other sectors like oil and gas, like construction, tech industry, especially around, I suppose, certain automations, data collection, certain ESG roles, and I suppose other kind of roles in where there is transferable skills, for instance, in finance, in HR, procurement. The mindset is shifting from experience in mining only to transferable skills, as long as I suppose candidates or employees have the right attitude and adaptability to move into different sectors. Though mining is, I suppose, an industry on its own, which isn't necessarily comparable to other industries. It is different. But I'd say it is a lot of the larger companies that are looking at this. I'd say smaller companies are not necessarily looking at that because they're trying to de-risk in who they take on. And they necessarily haven't got the budgets, the investments, and maybe the training to bring someone in from a different industry. Maybe in the future, they might not have many choices. But at the moment, it is the larger companies that are looking to bring in people from outside. And I suppose also comes against larger companies, not necessarily the smaller companies. They are looking at obviously succession planning. And with the smaller companies, it's not necessarily always feasible because they're only getting from a certain stage to the next stage, whether that's exploration to development. They're not looking beyond that necessarily, so there doesn't need to necessarily be succession planning in. But yeah, and I think companies do need to consider people outside of mining for certain roles. And again on my podcast, I do sometimes ask these questions about people from other industries coming into the mining, into our industry, and they can bring other skills that are not necessarily in our industry and look at things differently. If you're looking, if a role requires a lot of problem solving, I think maybe considering someone from outside of the mining industry that has a different set of eyes and different set of thinking, can create something different to what we're already currently doing in mining, but have still the same outcome. I was speaking to someone yesterday, funny enough, who working for a company that their company were involved in more the data side of geology, and they cover both mining and oil and gas. And basically their teams are combined. So they don't separate mining and don't separate oil and gas
That's
because
interesting.
it is a flow through. Yeah. So, yeah, they don't distinguish between the two.
Hmm.
So, yeah, so that was interesting. But yeah, the big companies are looking at people outside of our industry.
Yeah. Sometimes the people from outside, like you say, bringing those fresh perspectives can actually ask the best questions. And particularly when you're thinking about C-suite or board level candidates, that's really important. They need to know what to ask the leaders. I was having this chat with Rowan Fendler, who's now at Granger Rees, and he was at Cripps Sears before. He wrote a paper on this, and yeah, completely agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Rowan actually. He came on the podcast. So yeah, and again, I suppose with the skill shortages in mining, as we've mentioned, again, especially in the Western world, companies need to look at other ways in which they haven't been practicing before. So it is being open-minded. And I think it is being open-minded. It doesn't mean necessarily you have to consider someone outside of the industry, but being open-minded to considering someone that has certain skills and experiences, and maybe transferring that across to our industry.
Mm. Okay, let's talk about retention as well, because obviously finding the right people is only half the problem. Keeping them in positions is the other challenge. What can companies do to make sure that once they've got this talent in, once they've invested in them, trained them up, taught them everything they need to know about mining, what can we do to make sure that they stay?
Yeah, well, it is a difficult question. And there's not always necessarily a right and wrong answer. I think also it comes down to individuals as well, because individuals move for various reasons, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything the company has done. But I think it should be a key component of companies or even HR teams to find ways of trying to keep their staff and minimize their chances of leaving. And I think it's obviously critical that they keep thinking of different ways, because there isn't one way that fits all. Because obviously once you've found it, like as you mentioned, finding the right person, then keeping them and creating that environment to keep that particular person, or team. I mean, some of the things that I come across when I do speak to HR teams or even executives, some things could be a clear career progression, which I think is always important. Although you can't always predict necessarily the future, if there's some sort of career path that is outlined, although that can change, that is something that can help. And again, it shouldn't be just when the candidate starts, it should be an ongoing process throughout their tenure with the company. Obviously, salaries, incentives, salary obviously reviews, whether that's yearly, half yearly, maybe bonuses, anything like that, just to I suppose just to look at people's achievements. Again, it's difficult when you're a large company and how you put that across the board of everyone. But again, maybe smaller companies, certain positions, there could be ways in which bonuses can be introduced. Flexibility, I think, is the biggest one, and especially obviously over the last 4 or 5 years. I think flexibility is probably more of a key issue rather than salaries, because especially if you consider obviously fly out rosters, but working from home, where people got so used to working from home, their whole lifestyle changed. And now if companies enforce employees to go into the office 5 days a week, it really changes their whole environment. So having that flexibility, I mean, I still think people should go into the office certain times. I mean, I've got an office, but most of my employees work from home. I don't like working from home. I'm in the office, but it's just having that flexibility. Also, mental health support. I think that's I've heard examples of companies introducing mental health programs, and again, this is probably more so in the larger companies where they can accommodate such programs. Again, strong leadership, I think, and again, I've heard this kind of quote before, or people's opinions, where most employees tend to leave because of their boss, the people that they report into. So having strong leadership and having an understanding boss, I think, again, helps keep someone within the business. And again, sometimes that may be overlooked. And I think lastly, also, a good sense of purpose. I mean, we all go to work. Why are we going to work? Obviously, most of us would say we're going to work because we've got bills to pay. But it needs to be more than just that. It needs to be more than just going and paying the bills. There needs to be some sort of sense of purpose of being in work. So there's a lot of things that we can do around that, or HR teams, or even just just general teams, to encourage and create that kind of environment where you're not going there just because you need to pay the bills. It's creating some sort of sense of purpose for being what you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. So yeah, I think there's a few things. I think there are a few things there that I've taken away from people that I've spoke to in the past.
Yeah, the last two particularly are really interesting because I think leadership, well, they're linked, but leadership in particular, gets overlooked when we're talking about retention and workforce satisfaction. But actually, if you've got somebody at the top who, as you say, is not just understanding, but fair, who is driving the company forward and is fostering a really good workplace culture, that goes such a long way to employee
Yeah,
satisfaction and just general like well-being and contentment. And then likewise, that's linked to purpose, because if that person is setting a clear purpose for the company and cascading that down through the company, that's going to make such a difference to how people view work. It's not just a job, is it? Like you say, you're coming to work and doing something good in the world. And it sounds like, particularly with Gen Z, I've read a lot of studies around what they want from the workplace. And like purpose is going to become even more important for that generation. It's
yeah,
something they're going to expect as standard.
yeah. And if you've got that kind of CEO, it does filter through the whole company. And again, I suppose that's a culture that a CEO can create. And again, it takes time. It does. If a CEO is in a role for 2 years, they won't have that enough time to create that culture. But then should filter down to other managers as well. Although, and again, I suppose in bigger companies where you've got a lot of employees don't actually then necessarily interact with the CEO because they're too big, but they will be interacting with other bosses. And if they've got working off a similar culture or have a similar culture, and that culture is encouraging, good to work with that particular person, then again, it encourages people to stay rather than look at being persuaded to go to another company where the grass is greener, which is not always necessarily. So again, I suppose it's like any business is a people business. Any business is a people business. And if you've got a team that you're working with and around, and you respect each other and you get on well and you align with each other, then again, I think that's invaluable. Why you wouldn't necessarily look at a new opportunity.
Mm. I mean, I would argue, I think as an industry, we've placed too much value, too much weighting on technology and the hard stuff actually over the past 10 or 20 years. I think people are undervalued in the industry, and we need to start putting greater emphasis on the skills and the human touch that they bring
Yeah.
to mining.
And again, I suppose going back to what I mentioned about sense of purpose, I think employees sometimes as well need to be challenged a little bit, and be engaged with what their work they're doing. Because if you're in a role and the work is mundane, then your mind's going to be wandering and you're potentially looking for a new opportunity. But if you've got a manager that is going to be challenging you in whatever you're doing, it could be challenging you in many different ways, but it will keep you engaged in upskilling as well. Probably something else I didn't mention is upskilling. Companies, especially with, I suppose, a lot of AI that's coming into industries at the moment, and which potentially can replace certain roles. Upskilling in certain skills, maybe AI, it could be AI focused, will give you that, I suppose, better opportunity to not be a job that could be replaced by AI, because you'll be sitting on the other side of the fence using the AI. So yeah, just general, I think upskilling of the workforce, I think again is important to retain staff.
Mm. Do you have any examples of companies or programs within the industry where some of these things that we talked about are being put into practice?
Yeah, examples that I've not necessarily personally come across, but when I've spoken to certain people. A few weeks ago, I was speaking to someone in Western Australia, and they've introduced compressed rosters and also introduce mental health support programs, which again, it's becoming more, and especially I suppose in Western Australia, which may be more evident than maybe other locations around the world. There is a lot of obviously fly out workers, and I think them bringing in such programs, and I've done a few podcasts with a few individuals that have gone through horrific situations around mental health, have come out the other end, thankfully. But I think companies are more realizing more and more that they do need to put these kind of programs in place, because everyone can be vulnerable to those particular situations. So that's one example. Also, I spoke to someone probably a few months ago in Africa, and they created a mentorship kind of program where they pair up some of their younger engineers with seasoned professionals. And obviously that helps and transfer knowledge from the more experienced engineers, workers, to the younger generation. It's like a bit like I suppose, a buddy system. And I think that particular concept should definitely be more something that should be coming to our industry even more and more, as I mentioned previously, where a lot of our industry, people within our industry, are going to be probably retiring and leaving the industry. They're also obviously going to take their skills and experience with them.
Mhm.
So I think trying to get some of these more professional, more experienced workers helping the younger generation more so. And that could even mean bringing in outside consultants to help work with a group of people over a period of time, in for a few months, because they're probably going to pick up so much valuable experience. So that's something there. One company I was speaking to in Africa, and I suppose like anything, it's trying to be creative, in whatever you're trying to do. And I suppose, as I mentioned, and obviously everyone's aware, the whole skill shortages. I just think that we just need to try some of these various programs, implement certain like programs into our teams and into our businesses. Some may work, some may not. But if we don't start trying, some of these skills and experiences will be leaving our industry. And then it's an uphill struggle to get the younger generation to get up to speed, where, as their predecessors, where they've come from. So I think it's important that we look at things in different perspectives and try and work and build on something, be creative, just to help everyone in our industry.
100%. I mean, when you think about, I think it was McKinsey actually put out an article a couple of years ago, and they were saying that a lot of leaders that they had surveyed they were finding that talent shortages were holding them back from like key productivity goals. If that was the situation 3 years ago, what's it going to be like now? And like you say, that knowledge is slipping away. That's important stuff that we're losing if we don't capture that in some shape or form, whether it's mentorship, whether it's through, I don't know, AI enabled systems. What have you got to lose at the end of the day?
Yeah, yeah. And like I said, when I first got into the mining industry, they were saying back then there was a skill shortage. Things haven't changed. It's probably got a little bit worse, to be honest. So, and again, I think it's a global thing, and not just necessarily mining. I think other industries as well. I suppose we could then talk about branding, because
Mm.
there isn't. Other industries are more attractive, or it seems they're more attractive to go into, but mining is just as attractive. It's just we don't sell it like that. Um, so I was speaking to someone a few weeks ago who's both their children are looking to get into the mining industry, because their father was in the mining industry. And the reason why they are is because they've seen some of the things. All right, it is a difficult industry, but when you want to travel around the world, when you want to explore, experience different cultures, get well paid, there's some of the advantages and a necessity of mining, of what mining actually represents, because it's never going to go away. And those combined benefits is really what, well, there's some of the benefits that we need to sell to people, that we should be trying to get into the industry. And they've seen that, and that's why they want to continue or start in the industry, because not many other industries will necessarily always have those benefits.
Couldn't agree more. I think it's a great place to work, but like you say, we undersell ourselves a bit. So is there anything else that companies can do to attract and retain staff with the right skill sets? I know that you said you look at other industries as well in the resource sector. Is there anything that we can learn from them when it comes to this?
Um, I mean, I've been in the mining industry now for nearly 15 years. So if I go back when I was recruiting in other industries, maybe in construction, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that will be too dissimilar. Um, I think I think as we mentioned, branding can be something, and onboarding experiences. Um, as far as I'm aware, for instance, the energy sector, there's a strong cross training and upskilling of staff, again, which I think helps with keeping them within the business. Because if you're in a particular role and suddenly that particular role is no longer needed, if you've got other skills, you could then potentially move into another part of the business and use your additional skills. So it goes back to what I said originally about learning new skills. I think if you're a mine engineer, for instance, maybe look at some other training that you could undertake to then look at other parts of the business. If, for instance, mine engineering slowed down and there could be potential opportunity for redundancy, your position, if you had some other skills, you could then potentially move into a different area of the business. So I think multi-skilling and training in other areas is obviously going to be beneficial. And again, I suppose for mining companies to adopt a more structured and learning development program, I think that's important. Again, I don't know too much about that because it's not the areas that I recruit in. So, but I suppose it's just being mindful, and even if companies don't actually have certain particular training programs where you're able to upskill, I think as an individual, you should look at this yourself. I mean, personally, myself, I've done a lot of personal development, more so in the last, well, I would say from about 2017, for a few years. I've done a lot of personal development, which led me to starting up the podcast. So I think sometimes it is looking at programs yourself, maybe doing courses to upskill in certain areas that are outside your core area that you get paid to work on a daily basis. So yeah, I think there are a few things there.
Did you start the podcast out of interest? Going off topic a little bit.
Sorry, say that again.
How did you start the podcast? Obviously, we all know and love it, but what's the story behind it?
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned at the time, I was doing some personal development, and one of the mentors that was mentoring me at the time had a successful podcast. This was back in 2018. And he was saying that podcasting was going to be a new phenomenon. In North America at the time, I think podcasting was pretty big. In the UK at the time, podcasting wasn't really heard of, to tell the truth. And so I did a 2-day course, and I thought, right, what can I think I know how to start a podcast, but what can I start it in obviously within mining or even recruitment? And just something come to me and thought, well, why don't I have a podcast that is educational, and at the time I was looking at just interviewing CEOs of mining companies, puts me in front of them as well. And also eventually puts myself and my brand out there a lot more. I also educate myself, but also educate the audience as well. So that was back in 2018. Took me a few months to get up and started. I was doing a lot of face-to-face interviews. And yeah, it just then grew from there. And after probably about 15 episodes, I needed to then go online because it was working. And to sort of scale the podcast, I would love to travel around the world and just interview people, but unfortunately, because the podcast is free and I don't charge anyone, unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that. So it all then had to go online, and then it escalated from there. After about a year, I was getting a lot of people approach myself to come onto the podcast and some PR agencies. And that's when I decided to do 2 episodes a week, which we've done since then. And we've done, I think we're around about the 550 episode mark now.
Ooh.
So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey. But as long as the audience enjoy the podcast, they learn from it. And I've known more, and even more recently, I know because the guests have contacted me afterwards. Some of the guests that do come to the podcast, they are getting something from it. One of the consultancies, one engineering consultancies I had on the podcast, within the first week or two after it was released, they got 3 inquiries. Another company was in a position where they were looking to sell their company, and at that particular time someone listens to the podcast and then approached them. Although they didn't use that particular company, there was another company at the particular same time so there was a little bit of a competition, and as far as I know, the deal has been done or is about to be completed. So again, it's based on just having that podcast and someone listening to that. And I know last year, someone else that was looking to raise money, they had a merchant bank approach them after listening to the podcast, based on that, and wanted to find out more and see how they helped. So by guests coming on, they're getting something out from it, and hopefully the audience are also learning as well.
Yeah, that's the best feeling, isn't it? When everybody wins the back of something like that.
Certainly is.
Okay, final question then, to bring us back. How do you see the talent situation panning out in the mining industry over the next 5 to 10 years? Are we doing the right things? Are we going to move this conversation forward, or are we going to be having this same chat in 10 years' time?
I hope we're not having the same chat again in 5 or 10 years' time. It's obviously going to be challenging, and there's obviously going to be a continued demand for certain roles, especially technical people. And also we need more and more people to enter the industry. First of all, I suppose some of these people need to start studying mining related courses again, because a lot of the courses, their entrance numbers are, I suppose, at historic lows. And again, this is probably in the Western world more so than developing countries, where I think developing countries, their numbers are reasonably good. But overall, I think we still need more people. And I suppose also with the whole bust and boom cycle and the mining life cycles, when things are booming, it's great. But when things are tough, what we don't want to do is for people to leave the industry, which again, I think when I mentioned about upskilling in other areas, and I know it's not as easy as it sounds, but if you're able to upskill with certain skills, then maybe it's something you might be able to offer them. Because what we don't want to do is for workers to leave our industry, because sometimes they may go to another industry and may not come back again. So I think that could be an issue. Again, with what's happening around automation, AI, again, will that replace certain jobs? Perhaps certain jobs, but we need to be and I suppose if anyone thinks about that, whether their job can be automated or not, I think what you need to think about is what can you do so it can't be automated. And there's obviously certain things that automation can't do. And any business is a people to people business. And unfortunately, unless you like talking to robots, you need to somehow make your role where you're constantly talking to people, solving problems, solving challenges, and having that personal relationship and interaction. Everyone, I suppose, if you look at the world in any industry, we've evolved. So innovation is always going to keep coming. I think companies probably, and again, around recruitment, retention, I think companies need to continue and improve ways to invest in people, improve cultures of organizations. And maybe we probably need to see, what I like to see is more collaboration between industry, education, and governments to sort of build and help facilitate building talent pipelines. I think that's important as well. And I suppose lastly, which we can cover, branding. I think branding and the branding of the mining industry certainly needs to improve. I was speaking to someone quite a while ago, probably a good 6 months ago. I think they were in a marketing position with one of the big mining companies. And when she looked at their marketing material involved and was around machinery. Now, anyone that knows or may even know anything about mining will translate that to probably big machines. But I think that's a wrong image to give of our mining industry. What we should be doing is maybe marketing mining as essential for mankind, travel the world, help maybe facilitate moving into a green economy. There are just a few things I just thought of off the top of my head. The marketing should be around that, not necessarily around big machines, around people. And I think that's something the industry needs to think about more so, not around big machines, maybe around the people interaction side and what mining actually means to humanity. I think marketing needs to be around that. So yeah, there's a few things to think about.
Yeah, I agree. We need to put a human face on the mining industry. That's very important going forward. Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you for letting me turn the tables on you. I'm glad we
that's
finally
fine.
formalised this conversation.
Yeah, no, and I hope that's fine. I hope your audience got something out of that. And if they've got any other questions, more than happy to answer them or give or speak over the phone. If they've got any questions around career advice, recruitment, etc., they're more than welcome to help provide that advice.
Thank you. That's a good point. I will pop a link in the show notes to the Dig Deep podcast, to the Mining International website, and then I'll add Rob's LinkedIn profile as well in case anybody wants to connect afterwards. And thank you so much to our listeners. It's been a pleasure having you with us today. We'll be back after the summer with some new episodes. Have a wonderful summer, everybody. We'll see you very soon.
Thank you.